Are you considering buying an investment property right here in South Carolina, specifically the Midlands of South Carolina, Columbia, Lexington, or Lake Murray area? Well, over the years as a real estate agent, I've helped multiple people purchase rentals, Airbnb, and investment properties right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. As well, I've talked to many that the moment I share some of this information with them, they just about hang up the phone on me and go and try and find somewhere else to invest. That's right. These are the things and the reasons why you should not invest here in South Carolina. And for those that are not investors and just looking to purchase, this first thing I cover is probably one of the biggest things most people are confused about South Carolina and one of the most questions I get asked. So stick around for it. And just so you know this isn't clickbait, I'm gonna get started with the one that literally will make you possibly stop this video and move on, which I hope you don't, and I hope you watch till the end because the algorithm appreciates it, but there's a lot of information I'm gonna cover. But either way, we're gonna dive into taxes. All right, so South Carolina tax structure is one of the things that confuses people the most and will turn a lot of people off from investing here in South Carolina. You probably hear a lot that South Carolina has great property tax rates, which is true. However, this is true if it is your primary residence. On average, across the state of South Carolina, depending on what county you live in, but the average is about 0.6% of the assessed value. Pretty good when you look at nationwide. However, this is not the same when it comes to investment properties. I'm gonna break this down so you understand it and give you some real numbers that I have pulled from the county websites. I'm not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. This is just public information I pulled to share with you to help you make that decision. So right here in South Carolina, we essentially have three different tax rates. Don't get tied up in these first numbers. I'll dive into it more. We have a 2% rate, a 4% rate, and a 6% rate when it comes to real estate. 2% is gonna be for agricultural. We're not gonna dive into it in this video as we're talking about investment properties. 4%, that is going to be your primary residence, the resident that you live in a majority of the year. Then there's the 6% rate. The 6% rate is gonna be any investment property or secondary homes. If it's your vacation home, if it's your friends are staying in it and you're renting it out to them, you are not primarily living in it, you're gonna be assessed at the 6% rate. Now, this is where it gets more confusing to people. We have what is called a mill rate. I'm not getting the details of what that is, but each county and each realistically school district and area has a different mill rate that's gonna give you the actual taxes that you pay. So just because you have a primary residence doesn't mean you're gonna be paying 4%. Like I said, you're gonna be paying significantly less than that after the mill rate. Again, not gonna break down the math to that, but I'm gonna give you some numbers to make sense of it. So because we're talking about investment properties, I ran through a property in Lexington and a property in Richland County, the primary area that I get a lot of people looking. First one I ran in Lexington is gonna be in the Persimmon Grove neighborhood. I have had a client that has had a rental in this neighborhood. I ran these numbers today, right here in December of 2023. So you can get an idea of right now, one, how far your money goes, what that tax rate is gonna be, and what rental rates are per se in that neighborhood. Obviously it varies on different neighborhoods. Then I ran in Richland County, another neighborhood, Lake Carolina Centennial. Have a client that has had a rental in that area as well. So these are the two areas I'm gonna break down, give you raw numbers. The basis I used was a $250,000 house. To give you an idea, what does that get you? So in Persimmon Grove, it got me about an average of a 2,000 square foot house. In Lake Carolina, it got me an average of 2,200 square foot house in Centennial specifically. So that's what we're using this basis off of. So let's start with the 4% rate, that primary residence rate, so you can see the differences between those. So we'll start with Lexington County, Persimmon Grove. So again, we're doing this off of a $250,000 house, and I ran that through the Lexington County tax estimator to give you what your estimated taxes would be in Lexington County at a $250,000 house. For a primary residence, what I got was $1,429. And again, you can go verify this. This is all public. You can go on Lexington County's website and they have a tax estimator. So that is going to be Lexington County, $250,000 house, primary residence estimate. Now, Let's give you the Richland County numbers for the same. What I got in Richland County, a little bit higher with taxes in Richland County. They came out at $2,033. So if you can't read that, I know I got a little bit of chicken scratch in there. Lexington County, $1,429.69 was your estimate. Richland County, $2,033 is your estimate. Now, this is where things change. Let's talk about secondary residence. Again, I've heard it all. Well, what if I live in the state and it's just a secondary home? Same thing. This has another question I get. Well, how does this pertain to my mortgage? If I buy it as a secondary mortgage, doesn't matter. It's, again, you have to prove to the county this is your primary residence. There's an application online, you have to switch your driver's license over, you have to get utility bills in your name and do all those things and prove that you actually live there. Do not try and game the system. People have tried this and of course they will get in trouble for tax fraud essentially. So do not try and game the system. If you do not live there, it is not your primary residence where you live in a majority of the year, this is what your taxes are gonna be. 6% rate after the mill rate. Start with Lexington County. You read that correct. $7,372.96 a year. Again, a big difference from one to the next. Richland County, $8,252.50 is your estimated taxes on a secondary residence in Richland County in this region, Lake Carolina Centennial. So, again, I know a lot of you may click off the moment I show you this because does it math out when we talk about rental rates versus what you're paying a month? Now again, I've had people do this. This is where I tell people, if you are trying to finance an investment property, it makes it very hard for these numbers to work because I'm gonna give you average rental rates in these areas as well. If you're buying cash, it's a completely different story. But once you start talking about your HOA, your insurance, as well as these taxes, where does that come from? Now, how have people done this over the years? Right? There's investment properties around, we've seen them. What you're really banking on here is equity. Over the years, historically, we gained about 5% year over year. Obviously 21 and 22 quite a bit different because we gained about 15% to 18% equity year over year. 23, we've kind of come back to about a 2%, 3% range. But this is what people have banked off of that year over year equity of hanging on to the property versus monthly, it's very difficult to make ends meet. Now let's talk about actual rental rates. So again, we're basing this off of a $250,000 house. In Persimmon Grove, that got you about a 2,000 square foot house. So that's what we're doing here, is a 2,000 square foot house. I ran rental rates, and over the last year, what I saw is homes going up on the market for rent that went actually rented between 1,272 square feet and 2,516. So we're sitting kind of right in that middle. Those range from 78 cents a square foot up to $1.49 a square foot. But the average was about $1.13 a square foot. So you're talking about $2,200 a month in rent. Again, if you are financing this deal, you add in your mortgage costs with current interest rates, as well as you add in this number down here, HOA's insurance. Does it math out? For most people, that answer is no. If you're buying cash, completely different story, correct? Let's talk about Richland County down here. So 250,000 got us in Lake Carolina Centennial about a 2,200 square foot house. So 2,200 square feet. 2,200 square feet, rental rates in the same neighborhood over the last year, a little bit closer in range, not as many rentals as there were in Persimmon Grove, but about $1 a square foot. So you're talking about the same, about $2,200 in rent in this neighborhood. So again, hopefully these numbers can help you understand why South Carolina may not be the best place for you to invest. Now, we're gonna dive into some other topics that are really important as well. Foreclosures as well as Airbnbs. The other two big questions I get when it comes to investors. All right, so we've taken the whiteboard away, but first let's talk about foreclosures. This is probably a question I get asked the most. Once I pull those numbers out, people say, well, what about foreclosures? Maybe I'll save a little bit of money by buying a foreclosure. What can we do about purchasing a foreclosure? This is really important because there's a lot of confusion when it comes to pre-foreclosures. There are websites out there, not gonna name the names, that like to share what are called pre-foreclosures online. I get a lot of people reaching out saying, hey, I see this pre-foreclosure, can we go see it? That answer is no. Why? Well, it's somewhat of a marketing gimmick, partially, but two, it's really just information. What it means is that the bank has essentially filed for foreclosure. That foreclosure process is extended. It takes time. This is not something like, hey, you get a letter in the mail that says the bank's filed for foreclosure and tomorrow they kick you out. No, this is a very lengthy process. I'm talking about months, sometimes years to actually go to foreclosure. During that time, some things happen, right? They settle that debt, they sell the home. There's so many different things, but during that time of quote unquote pre-foreclosure, that person still legally owns a home. And it doesn't mean that it's actually on the market. We've had people in our office, agents, go out and knock on some of these people's doors and they said, this is actually not entirely true. Our house is not in foreclosure. There was a clerical error with the HOA and we've gotten that all resolved. As well, you can go look this up online. There was a doctor, I believe, in Florida that sued one of these companies that said, they put my house was in pre-foreclosure, makes me look bad, and it was not in pre-foreclosure. So that's why I say these pre-foreclosures really don't mean anything. But now let's go to actual foreclosures. How does that process work? Because this is another confusing thing too. People come to me and they, hey, I see these sites on the foreclosure sites and the auction sites. How does that work? Can we go look at those homes? And the answer is no. Again, exactly as I said, until that house is actually foreclosed and go to auction, those owners have legal rights to those homes. You cannot go and knock on the door and go check out those homes. There's no lock boxes on them. Those people legally own those homes. What happens is that bank, typically, they're gonna take it to the auction. They're gonna try and sell at the auction. We have no partake in this. I don't go to auctions with you and like root you on and cheer you on. They don't care about real estate agents. You're not gonna be able to finance, to be 100% honest, which you need to do is come with a briefcase, not really, but you basically put a deposit and then you have to pay the full amount within a certain period of time. But banks are not going to lend on these properties because typically, one, they haven't seen them, so they can't go out there and assess these houses. And two, a lot of times there's a lot of issues with them that need to be addressed in order to make them livable. So you're more than likely going to have to write a check for these, maybe hard money lenders, things like that. But this is not something that we can be involved in and assist you in that process. Again, you're going to have to go to the auction, make your bid on those properties. Now, what you do see from time to time, if it does not sell at auction, the bank will then go and list it on MLS. Now, you kind of see two different ways. Sometimes it goes up as is, and I have helped people purchase these. They go up on MLS as is, you go in, all the issues, you are taking them as is. The bank is not going to fix anything. There are other circumstances where the bank actually comes in and makes it livable. They'll replace the carpet, do some paint, things like that, then they'll sell it on the general MLS. You're not going to get as much of a deal on these than you would at an auction, unless you're buying the as is. But again, going backwards, banks are not typically going to lend on these because they are not livable. The ones that I've helped people buy, they had to buy cash because there was no running water, no running electricity, plumbing issues, air conditioners didn't work, electrical issues, so many different issues that a bank is not going to lend on those. Yes, I know you see a lot of things online about these investment loans, but they're very particular in how they work. You can reach out to me. I can get you in touch with one of our preferred lenders and they can dive into the details of those. But it's not as blanket as, hey, here's a house, give me some extra money to get fixed up. That's not how it works. So again, I like to cover that because I get a lot of questions about these foreclosures people see online and say, hey, can you help me out with it? And up until that property's on the MLS, that answer is no. Can you go see it? Up until that property's on MLS, that answer is no. Yes, we do have an investment team at our office. I have assisted them in some of these properties where they did purchase them at auction, and we literally had to go and walk around the outside, maybe peek in the windows, hopefully nobody's home, right? See what's going on, and let us know like, hey, how does the condition look? But we could not go inside those houses. Even more so, this has happened in our office. The investment team have purchased home from the auction. Well, then you go show up at the house and someone's there. Now you gotta go through the eviction process to get them out. So again, I know HGTV and so many different places have made this seem like it's a simple solution to go make a ton of money, but that is not always the case. There's a lot of complexities to this and a lot of people get in over their head. Again, I'm not telling you do not do this. There's a lot of people that are savvy investors that I have helped later on sell their homes and things like that that have done this. I know a lot of people have done this, clients I've had that, I did this years ago. It was a big, challenge for us to take on, and it worked out. But again, you got to know what you're getting into, and so that's why I bring that out. Now let's talk about the Airbnb thing. So Airbnb, a lot of people made a ton of money over Airbnb through the years, and so just like crypto and all those other, they start selling courses training people how to do Airbnbs. Pretty soon it became this trend where everybody was trying to get into the Airbnb train, like let's jump on. Now in some areas, it's actually pretty saturated. That's right. You can go to some areas and there's one on every corner. You may be gone on vacation and looked it up and wow, there's so many here, right? So, is it a good place to invest? Now, one site you can use is a site called AirBnb. You do have to pay for this. I do not personally have a membership because I always tell people, just like school ratings, just like crime ratings, you need to do that research yourself. I am not here to tell you like, this is the place to invest in Airbnbs because things change so much. You need to do that research yourself to help you make that financial decision. As well, I'm not one of those agents that's gonna tell you, yes, this is great just so I can close a house with you. That's not who I am. Now, there's another way to do this, and this is a simpler way that I've had people utilize to see if it's a good time to do Airbnbs, is literally go in the area you're considering it and look right now. How many are available if you wanted to book an Airbnb in the next, call it, week? Are there a lot? Or is it like, wow, no, there's nothing. There is nothing available till, a couple more months. Well, great. That's kind of showing you what saturation is like in that area. Is based on availability. So that's one. And then of course, too, like I said, websites like AirBnb that can help you with this. But more importantly, this is what I need to talk about specifically here in the Midlands of South Carolina. With that said, there are tons of discussions and debates right now at town halls over regulating Airbnbs right here in the Midlands of South Carolina. Now, before I dive into what these look like, you may ask, well, how is that even fair? How can they say that? Well, here is what their justification is. Their justification is that my house here that I live in is zoned residential. I'm using it as a residential property right now, so I'm adequate to the zoning. The moment you switch it to an Airbnb, you are no longer using it as a residential property. You're using it as a commercial property, very similar to a hotel, because no one's using it as a resident, they're using it as this overnight stay. So again, not my justification, that is their justification of why they feel that they should be able to regulate Airbnbs in residential areas. So one of the first to try and ban this in the area was City of Columbia. Now, City of Columbia ultimately didn't ban them. They just simply made it where you gotta do these licensing fees and there's different regulations to make it happen. But now Lexington is onto that chain as well. And it gets a little confusing because we have the town of Lexington as well as the county. And right now we're talking about the county is really the one that's trying to put regulations down. So the first regulation they've tried to put up outside of this whole debate of whether or not they need to regulate them is banning them completely in HOA neighborhoods. Now, for those of you who have talked to me about Airbnbs, I have said this many times before. Most HOAs do not allow Airbnbs. They typically have like a 6-month minimum rental. So if you have a rental, it's fine as long as there's a 6-month minimum term. Because of those minimum terms, does not allow Airbnbs. And just because you don't see that regulation now, does not mean it will not show up in the future. I was helping a client that was trying to purchase an Airbnb around the lake, and we were looking in an HOA neighborhood. And there was nothing in the bylaws that said they couldn't do it. So called up the HOA and said, hey, we just want to make sure, can you do Airbnbs in this neighborhood? And they said, technically yes, however, we are in the process of currently changing our bylaws. We have voted to remove them. So we're in the bylaws of changing it. So by next month, they will not be allowed. So again, because of their bylaws, they can change these things relatively quickly. And so today it may be okay, but tomorrow it's not. And so a lot of people are like, why is the county even trying to do this? Because most HOAs are already banning it. But again, the counties are trying to ban them in these HOA neighborhoods. Now, there's a whole other whirlwind to this as well. There's the state. The state, interesting enough, has proposed, now bills get proposed all the time. That doesn't mean they're passing. So don't get too of your head yourself on these things. The state is trying to propose a bill that says, county, city, you don't have the right to tell people what they can do with their residents. So if you want to go and tell people they cannot Airbnb their resident, well then we are going to withhold tax money from you. Again, just proposal, but it goes to show there is a lot of mixed dynamics here in the Midlands of South Carolina when it comes to these. So again, I'm not telling you do not invest. I'm just telling you be cautious. I'm not someone that's gonna come on here and say, yeah, come on, let me help you buy this place, when 2 months later call me saying, Brandon, I can't rent here anymore. I need you to help me sell it. Again, ultimately you have to make the best decision for yourself. Do I want to buy an investment property? Is it a good idea here in South Carolina? Some of these reasons you may say, nope, Brandon, I decided we're gonna go look somewhere else. Totally understand. I'm not here to argue with you on that. Or you may say, you know what, it still makes sense for me. Like I said, I've helped a lot of people do this. I have plenty of people that have bought rentals as well as Airbnbs. So again, I'm not telling you don't do it, just do your homework.